This is Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. I'm your host, Adam Cox, and joining me today, we have a very special guest. We have a certified Ziegler legacy, a keynote speaker, a best-selling author, Tucker Bearden. Welcome to the show.
Hey, brother. Thank you so much for having me. It truly is an honor to be on the show.
It's fantastic to have you on the show. So before we get into your book, what inspired you to create the book, let's learn a bit about you. So if you have to introduce yourself, let's say in just a few sentences, how do you do that so that people get a snapshot of who you are?
I'm a practitioner of change. I was born with a neurological abnormality known as Asperger's that hinders my natural abilities to understand certain social cues and emotional responses. And throughout my journey, I learned to reprogram the subconscious mind in ways that allowed me to actually step on stages and share my message with the world. I know that's more than a few sentences, but I think that's about as short as I can make it.
No, that's a fantastic introduction because, for some people on the autism spectrum, including those people with Asperger's, they find it really difficult to read, let's say the social interactions, the cues and things like that. So I imagine, I found it nerve-wracking when I started speaking, to be on a stage and you've got all these eyes looking at you. Did you find it a bigger hurdle with the extra, challenge of having this particular different way of how your mind processes information?
Absolutely. I mean, you got to think, at one point, I couldn't even go to grocery stores and shop for groceries. I couldn't go shop for my own clothes. I couldn't, it was hard just to go out to eat in places with my family because my social anxiety was crippling. I'm 28 years old and I've had multiple heart attacks due to just absolute wall-to-wall panic. Going up on stage was nerve-wracking, but at the same time, like, no matter how good at it I get, every time there is that essence of it. And when I step off stage, I do still have to go backstage and cool my nerves. Like, that's still a thing. It is, because I mean, you speak in front of 300, 400, 5,000 people, and you're feeling the energy from all of them. And it's an emotional roller coaster, and you're just up and down and up and down. And then at the end, there's the big standing ovation, and it's all that energy. You gotta calm down from that, like, especially as somebody on the spectrum. So yeah, the challenges were quite drastic, and that's really where that's the basis of my story on stage, is just really how I went from A to B.
Absolutely, and I can relate to the social anxiety. I mean, just to give you a bit of background on me, when I was 19 years old, I was a recluse for about 6-7 months, because every time I thought about leaving my apartment, my heart would beat out of my chest, 200 beats per minute. So, it is crippling when you've got severe social anxiety. It stops you doing so many different things. What was the catalyst, as someone that is this, very specialist person looking at change? What was the catalyst for change within you to go from that person that had that severe anxiety, couldn't go to the grocery shop, to then suddenly speaking on stages and writing best-selling books? What was the thing that kind of made that happen?
Pizza. It was pizza. That sounds like a joke, but it really was. So I was grooming horses for a living, and working with thoroughbred racehorses, because I noticed that I was a lot better around animals than people. And I was working 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so I was trying to find a way to entertain myself by looking for free movies on YouTube, and I ended up finding out that they weren't there, but I did find something called TED Talks. And I saw a talk by Simon Sinek that said, "Start with why." And I was just blown away by it. And I was like, wow, I'd never heard of public speaking. I was like, wow, I want to do that for people. I feel like that's what I was put here to do. And then that demon on my shoulder, the little voice in the back of my head was like, dude, you can't speak to 3 people without having a panic attack. What makes you think you're going to speak to 300? And I was like, wow, that's true. So I started going to Walmart and the mall and places like that. and I would try to randomly communicate with people without freaking out. And I would do it in small ways by like walking past them and complimenting them on their shirt or whatever, and until I could have on an actual conversation. And I realized I still was running into walls. And then I heard a quote by a man named Zig Ziglar. And he said, you can have anything in this world you want if you're only willing to help enough other people get what they want. And I was like, wow, I've been looking at it the wrong way. I keep saying I want to speak on stage because I want to speak on stage. But the real question is you want to speak on stage, but what have you done for the world that's worth even talking about? Like, you say you deserve it because you've worked hard your whole life. And I mean, everybody deserves an opportunity, but what's your story? What's the point? Who are you teaching? Who are you helping? Is it just because you want people to cheer for you, or is it because you actually have a message worth capable of changing lives? And I had to really sit down and ask myself that. And my answer was I wasn't sure, but the journey had to be taken anyway, because my anxiety was the point where I was, like you said, a recluse. Like, I couldn't function in society. And so I started going out. I made $179 a week. I'd take $50 out of each paycheck. I would go to Little Caesars, which is about 3 blocks away. I would buy 7 $5 hot and ready pizzas. And I would ride around on my bicycle each day, and I'd give these pizzas out to homeless people in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'd sit down beside them, and I would say, tell me your story, brother. Share some wisdom with me. Because who's going to judge? Who's the last person in the world that's going to judge you for having social anxiety? The homeless guy on the side of the street. And some of them are talking to people that aren't there. So they ain't going to have no trouble talking to you. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I started talking to them. And just for time's sake, we can go over I could tell you the story as to my big aha moment if you want, but my thing was I started talking to them, and after months of doing this, a homeless man told me a story, and that story woke me up. You know, they say that change happens in a second. It just takes it takes years. It may take years to get to that moment. You know.
I mean, that sounds so intriguing. You know, I'm curious as to what this homeless guy told you, because, you know, if it had the impact on you, maybe it would have the similar impact on other people. What did you learn from this homeless guy?
So I got chills just thinking about it. So I was just taking my normal routine, and one day I decided to go a different route, down a path on my bicycle that I wasn't sure about, because you ever look at a neighborhood and you're like, I shouldn't go there. It was one of those, but I had a logging chain wrapped around. I always kept not a logging chain, but the really thick chain with a lock on the end of it for your bike. Always kept it wrapped around my arm underneath my hoodie. So I took a chance. Anyway, I went down in this neighborhood, and there was this old man on the side of the road. He's very obviously homeless. And I parked my bike, and I sit down beside him, and same as always, I went to give him a pizza, and he stopped me. And it was this old black man with white curly hair. And I joke on stage and tell people it wasn't Curtis Lowe. But he stopped me before I even said anything. I handed him the pizza, and he said, thank you. He said, young man, can I tell you a story? I said, yes, sir. That's why I'm here. And he said, sit down. I was like, okay, this is cool. I sat down with him, and he said, you remind me of a young man. A long time ago, he went to a temple where a monk's temple, and he asked those monks to train him, and they said yes. Well, after being there for a few weeks, one morning the head monk burst into the dorm and woke everybody up, screaming at them, everybody get up, go outside now. And then they get up, and they run outside, and there's a bunch of shovels waiting on them. And they each pick up a shovel, and the head monk points to a massive mound of dirt, and he says, I want this mound of dirt moved from here to over there, almost 100 yards away. So they started moving the dirt. It took them 3 days to move all the dirt. And then when they were done, they were proud of their work. So they put down their shovels and they went into rest. And the next morning, even earlier than before, the head monk bursts in there, wakes everybody up, and rushes them outside and says, I don't understand what's wrong with y'all. I told you I wanted the dirt moved from over there to over here, right back where they had just moved it from. And so begrudgingly, they picked up their shovels and they moved the dirt once more. It took them 3 days to move the dirt. And when they got done, they were proud of what they did. They set down their shovels and they went into rest. And then a third time, even earlier than the day before, the time before, the head monk bursts into the dorm. He wakes everybody up. He gets them outside. And he says, I don't get it. I don't understand what's wrong with y'all. I told you I wanted the dirt moved from here to over there, right back where they had just moved it from. So the young man who had come to the temple, he snaps. He throws his shovel down. He says, I'm not doing it anymore. I came here to learn the way. I came here to learn more about myself, and you have me doing chores. And the old monk looked at him and said, young man, moving the dirt is easy. Thinking about it's hard. So the young man picked up the shovel and continued moving the dirt. And in that moment, I learned that anxiety was in the mind. It was never in the diagnosis. See, moving the dirt is easy. Thinking about it's what's hard. You're one that makes it complicated. You're the one that complicates your life and your environment. It's what's in your head. It's what's between your ears. And people destroy themselves with things they call and then they call it fate. You know, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will control your life, and forever you will call it fate. You are not defined. The other people's labels of you, other people's views of you hold no power over your life unless you give them that ability. True. You know, anxiety was in the mind, not the diagnosis. I am not my diagnosis. Okay. Anxiety is a result of a mindset, a mental loop. And my book actually talks about that loop. But that old man telling me that story, you know, I didn't even ask him to tell me the story. He just knew that I needed it. And you know, that's all he told me. And after that, I never saw that man again. And he left the pizza. he didn't even eat the pizza. He told me the story. And he set the pizza back on my pile of pizzas. And he walked away. And I was just frozen. I was just like, wow. Like, this whole time I've been trying to overcome a diagnosis, overcome a label, and you know, like, or a disease or whatever, and then the whole time it was in my head. It was just what I was thinking, because you know, we tell ourselves stories in our head, and we catch ourselves doing that. There's a chapter in my book called "Locating the Loop," and it's all about the science behind it. I mean, anybody ever got a song stuck in their head? You tell me no, I bet you'll lie about something else. It's the same thing. You get anxiety derives from the same loop that's created in the subconscious mind that happens whenever you get a song stuck in your head and you can't seem to get it to go away. When you shake and sweat, it happens because there's a chemical being released in your brain known as cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, shuts down the immune system. It was created evolution created it to help you run from tigers. There's no tigers left to run from. Like, it's not tigers anymore. It's stress about work. It's, you might lose your relationship, you might lose your business, this, that, and another. But at the end of the day, none of these things are going to kill you. and cortisol is designed to save your life, not prolong it.
Mm. It's a very interesting thing. You know, the human brain is hardwired for survival, not happiness. And I think what you figured out and what I figured out is that anxiety and the fear response isn't a reality. You know, in many ways, it's a mirage. And when you get close to the thing that you think is causing it, you know, the actual fear disappears. You know, it's a weird thing. But most people play this game where they think the mirage is so real, they didn't go close to it, and then they're trapped in these loops that you talk about. Obviously, the main reason we've got you on the show is to talk about your book. You're a best-selling author. What's the book called, and what was the catalyst for you to write a book? Because it's not, they say everyone's got a book inside them. What brought your book to the surface? What was the key thing that allowed that to kind of come through you?
So this is the book. It's I know it's backwards on the screen, but it's The Plate That Broke the World: One Man's Journey into the Ego. And it's a bestseller, so I'm really excited about that. I can't believe that an old farm boy from Arkansas ended up writing a best-selling book. But the catalyst for it was a struggling relationship. I was in a relationship with this woman that I thought I was going to marry. I mean, we were engaged, and something switched one day, and all of a sudden, I just couldn't make her happy, and it was, my life became a nightmare. I mean, every day when I came home, I was just like, what is it going to be today? Like, what is this? What's going to happen today? Because it was like, I dreaded coming home, because I felt like I was failing as a man in a relationship, because everything went from just sunshine and rainbows to all of a sudden this nightmare where I don't, like, you know, I don't make enough money. I'm not good enough this, I'm not good enough that, like this, that, and other. And I do not mention these things in the book because I am not going to demonize this woman in any way. That's why I'm not putting her name out there, and her name isn't even in the book anymore. But I caught myself at one point sitting in fetal position in the shower, crying, trying to piece together why I was such a failure at this relationship, because I've always been one of those people that never points the finger and says, well, you know, you can do better. Well, everybody can do better, but at the end of the day, there's got to be something in the mirror, you know, and I want to look at the mirror before I look at anybody else. And so the catalyst to the book was first of all trying to piece together what in the hell was going on. Like, I needed a full psychoanalysis on both of us. Why did this happen? Because if we were happy at one point and now we're not, that means there was something that flipped in the scale. All right. Whether it was on both sides or one. All right. And me being a scientist at heart, I am not walking away just because it got hard and going, okay, well, that sucked. No, I want to know why, because history repeats itself if you can't figure out why. And it aggravates me more than anything whenever I go to somebody and I ask them for advice and they go, well, that's just the way it is. No, it's not. That's the way you've accepted for it to be. I am not. No, this is America. I have freedoms, and I am a human. Therefore, I have the power to change things. It says in the Bible that if you want the mountain to move and you believe that it'll move, that it will move. That don't mean that some guy from the sky is going to grab the mountain and move it. It means you have the ability to pick up a rock and throw it and move it. And if you move enough rocks, the mountain will move. All right. So let's figure out what we need to move to make this mountain move. All right. So the book, I would have to actually read it in the book to tell you exactly how I came to the plate that broke the world, but I'll show you a picture in the book so you can see the actual plate that I'm talking about. So in the book, it talks about how I went to this place in my mind I call the void. And for some reason, everybody with Asperger's, or most people with Asperger's, or extremely high functioning Asperger's, have this thing in our mind that we either call the void, or I've heard it called the void, I've heard it called the canvas, I've heard it called the space, but it's just this empty space where you can test anything, and if it doesn't work there, it won't work in the real world, and everything has a life of its own. And I went to the void trying to find answers about our relationship, and it ended up creating this thing, this plate that I describe in my book. And I looked at it, and I walked around it, and I watched it, and I watched what it was doing, and it was just, it blew my mind. It was a completely different way of it was a completely different way of psychologically looking at our ego, and what happens and why our relationships break down. And once I came out of the void and I came back to reality, it was just like I was in a panic to try and write it down and put it, explain it. And the only way I tried writing it on paper, and it made no sense to my girlfriend at the time. But then all of a sudden I picked up a paper plate and I drew it on the paper plate, and it clicked with her, and she got it. And all of a sudden, even though we weren't meant for each other, for the short period of time after that, our relationship went back. We had the same spark we had the day that we met. That newness was there. That thing that you actually fall in love with whenever you meet somebody, that fire in your spirit whenever you're with that person, and everything is new and you can't do anything wrong, and you're happy to take out the trash. You're happy to do the dishes. You're folding laundry together is still fun. And we were back to that. And like I said, we weren't meant for each other, so we didn't stay with each other. But at the end of the day, once that realization came to be, it was just a different kind of understanding, and that's what the book is all about. It's that plate and how the plate concept functions. Because once you understand the functionality of the plate, you understand the psychology of your ego and why things in your life end up being either destroyed, slowed down, or stopped altogether. And there's only 39 pages, so anybody can read it.
Nice. So, I mean, in modern terms, the phrase ego is used quite regularly, often to mean, high levels of confidence, or, the need for validation or approval from other people. Very different from Freud's original, kind of idea or construct of, the ego compared to, the id and the other parts. What's your definition of an ego, and how does the metaphor of a plate help to dig deeper into what the ego is?
So, would you mind if I just read it out of the book?
Totally. That's fine. Yeah.
Because honestly, I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and days trying to sit down and word what you're asking me right now.
That's fine. You do that.
And then I ended up with a book. So, so let's see, where should we start? So we want me to start with the void and move into the plate concept itself?
Yeah, well, I guess the plate concept is the bit I'm most curious about, because it sounds like you've got a really original metaphor as to what the ego is, and I'm curious just to learn about that, really.
Let's talk about it. So I'll talk about how the plate was created, and then I will talk about explain the concept itself. So at the ending of chapter 1, the smallest pebbles, the biggest waves, it moves into chapter 2, the void, a safe place. And it says that, I took, it says, now figuring this part out was all fine and dandy. Where was it? After a while, I came to find that when we fought, I would try to explain how she made me feel in the moment, and it made her think I was judging her in some way. She would say things that, when angry, that made me feel less than a man. We held on to those things and created connections to false belief systems that we thought we had for one another. In the process of doing so, without knowing it, we were threatening each other's egos. You will come to find that very few people who become emotionally invested in that department walk away unscathed. When tampering with one's ego, you are poking a tiger with a stick. So the real source of our bickering was not the often meaningless things that stimulated arguments. The source of our problems was a compilation of scars carved onto the walls of our ego. Now, figuring this part out was all fine and dandy, but what do you do with it? You have to find a way to relay your message without your partner's defenses going up. We all know that once the hornet's nest is shook up, it isn't easy to move it. I had to find a way to not only explain this to her, but to myself. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled upon something, but what was it? I had a lot of questions, so I took them to the one place I knew that would have the answers. And no, it was not Google. And that's whenever it talks about going into the void. And this is what I'm fixing to read for you is the visual, so you can see the plate, because it doesn't make sense unless you can see it. So there's a place I go in my mind that I refer to as the void. It is a vast white space where sounds echo and theories are tested, but no one knows what happens there. Other than the painter holding the brush, no one dares roam there, and for good reason. Just as a blank canvas is home to a painter's brush, the void is my place of creation. Free from prying eyes, saturated misunderstandings, and judgment, I am free to do and create as I please here. It is mine alone. Within the void, I can build machines, inventions, and concepts, then test them to see if they will work before building them in real life. If it works in the void, it works in the world. When things get out of control, I simply wipe the slate clean and start over. But sometimes it isn't easy to erase everything. Sometimes I lose control. See, when you create things within the void, they tend to take on a life of their own, almost like a program. You bring the pieces and push play. What happens from there on is up to chance. There are creatures I have created here that end up stuck in my subconscious mind as if they were a virus I stumbled upon and couldn't shake off. I've learned to be cautious of what I allow to fester here. That is the beauty of it, though. Life. The void breathes life into ideas prior to conception. If they didn't do as they please, it wouldn't be real, would it? If they didn't take on a life of their own, whether mechanical or otherwise, it wouldn't be an experiment, now would it? It would be like sitting at the controls of a video game, making the avatar move as you please. That pre-programmed response defeats the purpose. It's funny when you think about it. Isn't that what God or whatever higher power you believe in did? Thought us into existence to see what would happen, gave us free will, sat back with a bucket of popcorn and a lawn chair and pushed play. Just another bit of code in the program, but I digress. Below, you will come to realize that within the void, though it is in your mind, it is part of you and you're within it. And in return, you follow its flow. The concept is simple. You bring what information you have and release it to the void with a set intention or goal in the mind, and the laws of cause and effect do as they please. Now, I'm just going to speed up and try and get to the end of this because I know we're taking up a lot of time. Once in the void. Okay, so once in the void, I released all the information I had tamed about my partner and me. I set my intention to find the answer, not knowing what would happen or how it would turn out. I let go. While standing in the blank space, colors, clouds, and blurred memories swirled around me from every direction. For a short while, I watched as the different clips, images, and sounds scrolled through one another like an old film wheel. Then everything stopped, and I could see two large rotating circles revolving around a singular point of focus, the plate. One circle had a slightly smaller radius than the other. The smaller one was inside the larger of the two. The space that made up the inside of the circle was empty second to a dot at the very center. Then outside of the circle, I noticed trees that seemed to be placed at random with no connection to one another. They surrounded the rotating circle with seemingly no rhyme, pattern, or reason. This is your garden. To get a better view, I walked under the rotating circle. While looking up at the center point, I realized that the circle wasn't a circle at all. but a two-dimensional rotating disc. Curiously enough, I didn't notice this before due to my perspective. Not yet grasping what I was looking at, something strange happened. I began to notice small rocks falling from above and landing on this disc as it rotated. Some of them were large and some of them were small, but all of them would inevitably get flung off of the edge of the disc as it continued to spin. Now, these rocks represent, and it tells this later in the book, but I'm just speeding it up. The rocks represent offsets, challenges, just debacles in life. And while looking across the some just yeah, okay. So some of them were large, and they would get flung off the edge as the disc continued to spin. As each stone made its way flying off the sides, it would often collide with one or two of the trees before hitting the ground and vanishing. Now, the trees represent the garden that you're growing in your life, the things you're building, okay? They didn't seem to do much damage, but some of the trees would fall and others would move. Some would just sit still. While looking across the field below the rotating disc, I saw that young lady standing alone with her head down, her arms crossed, sobbing. She also had a disc above her, but it was moving slowly and looked clustered. I could see the tears falling, but no matter how much I tried to move closer, she was always on the other side, always out of my reach. I shouted, and though it echoed through the void like a vast cavern, she did not hear my cries. Confused and a bit disoriented, I looked back up. Something had changed. Something was wrong. The rocks were still falling, but as they landed, tethers were being attached to them that were connected to the center point, like ropes that hold a boat to its dock. The tethers tangled the rocks, allowing no stone to escape. The disc still rotated, but was now weighed down and moving much slower than before. A few moments passed. Then the rocks began making their way off the sides, creating a carousel effect. More and more rocks fell over the edge, each with a rope tied tightly around it. As the disc rotated, the rocks gained momentum, eventually sticking out past the rim as if they were hanging onto the ropes for dear life. Each rope slowly got longer and longer until one after another they began tangling up in the trees surrounding the disc. Before I knew it, the tangled up mess had halted the rotation of the disc altogether. Now, even if I could have gotten closer to her, there was so many tethers that I wouldn't be able to navigate through them. There were so many they blocked out the light, leaving a shadow in their way, creating a darkness I could feel in my gut. She was gone, and there was nothing I could do to change that. Suddenly, the space between the large outer rim and the smaller inner circle began to light up like heated metal. It glowed and rotated free from the tangled tethers as it burned them in half, releasing the disc, releasing the stones all at once. The glowing ring rotated violently in one direction as the disc pulsated and rotated in the opposite direction faster than it ever had before. Now the rocks that fell onto the disc were being shattered on contact, and for the ones that made it to the edge, the heated ring severs the ties that may have been created along the way. Nothing but the dot remains, nothing but the center of focus that the disc rotated around. At that moment, I looked back across the field to see her standing only a few feet away, smiling with arms out wide. We hugged the same way we did in the beginning. We held each other in an embrace. It was as if I had left for a war and had just come home for the first time. And I didn't want to let her go ever again. I never wanted to feel helpless again. I never wanted to see her cry or be out of reach again. While holding her in my arms and thinking about what this all could mean, it came to me in a flash. I understood it all. I held her face, kissed her, and exclaimed, "I got it." Then I came back to reality with a fire lit in my soul. It was one of those aha moments that you can feel in your spirit. Everything was about to change. So that is, I know that took forever, but that is one of the part of one of the chapters in the book that explains the visualization of the process and what the ego really represents here is the glowing disc on the outside. So, you know, if you've ever looked at a paper plate, there's the ring in the middle that they draw there, and then it's got the lifted up edges and a ring around it. Well, in this concept, that ring on the outside, it once you understand and open up to your own ego and realize that it has the potential to be damaged, and you are not this invincible thing. it begins to glow, and it becomes a barrier. And that actually is in the next chapter in the book, is the ego barrier, or one of the next chapters in the book is the ego barrier. And it talks, so these ropes that it talks about connecting to the stones, these ropes are false tethers. They're false connections, false belief systems that you've generated over time. And the dot in the center is your focus. It's the moment. It's here. It's now. It's you. It's uno numero one. All right. And the debacles come, challenges come, and they fall, and they get rotated off of the plate, because the motion represents life. The motion, the rotation represents the actual, the continual motion of the life process, because stagnancy leads to death and motion is equivalent to life. And the stones move off the edge, and that's okay. It's okay for them to fall off the edge, but what's not okay is for you to create a connection between the stone and the dot, and for when that stone makes it past your ego, you keep holding on to it.
Yeah.
Eventually it tangles up with everything, and it's like throwing yarn into the spokes of a tire.
Yeah.
You can only do it so much, and it's going to stop.
That's it. Because it sounds like, I really like the metaphor, because you've got this representation of, the ego is trying to protect you at some level from these challenges that kind of hurl from the sky. And it does protect you so long as you don't hold on to these challenges and problems. And a lot of people, are holding on to baggage, not even from weeks or months ago, but sometimes years or decades ago, and they're still holding on to that. So that represents the stones tethered to the plate. And meanwhile, while everything's all clogged up, it then can't protect you from new challenges. So that's where you get the overwhelm. I think it's a really clever metaphor. I really like it. And since you discovered, because effectively you created it, but also discovered it in your own void, in your mind there, how has things changed for you in the sense of how you deal with challenges, how you deal with problems, how you feel about, the future? Has it had an impact on you from almost embracing this metaphor about what your own ego is?
Absolutely. It's my life is completely different. I obviously I'm still single, but that's just like, I'm not, I'm an aspie. I'm weird. Okay. I'm hard to, like, my quirks are very odd, and I don't expect that to be easy for anybody. But at the end of the day, like, my relationships in general with my family and my friends and everything, they're so much better, because it's a different way of looking at things. I mean, when you understand that like, you look at your garden, like the trees that grow in the garden, they represent all the things that you're growing in your life. And think back how many times you failed to uphold one of the 4 agreements. And that's another book that some other guy wrote. And the 4 agreements are: be impeccable with your word, never take anything personal, never make assumptions, and do good because you can. Where I say do good because you, or do good, he says do the best you can. I say do good because you can, not because you have to. Well, failing to uphold any of those, taking things personal and things of that nature, are where in my past I fell apart in my relationships. And I realized that holding on to those pains of the past, especially ones from long ago, like, the plate's rotating, and just like the earth rotates around the sun, and it takes a while to make it around. It may take a while, but it makes it back around. Okay. And when that rock that's attached to that, especially if it's a big one, attached to that rope, when it gets swinging around, it gains some momentum. And then one day you're going to be growing a tree, and you're going to be so proud of it. And out of nowhere, that thing's going to come back around, and it's either going to wrap around the tree and rip it from its roots, or it's going to hit it head on and crash everything that you've been working on. And even worse, if the rope's too long and you leave it there for too long, it reaches out past your own borders and messes up someone else's garden. And you start messing up other people's lives. And then your problems become other people's problems. If you've ever met an alcoholic or lived under the same roof as one, you've seen this happen. And that's exactly what that is. So it's helped me really a lot, disconnect from things and not take things so seriously. You know, there's a chapter in my book called the smallest pebbles, the smallest pebbles and the biggest waves. You know, like a large rock creates a big wave, but you can get just as big of a wave with enough tiny ones over a period of time. You know, and so it's really helped me not can make so many connections to what people do, because at the end of the day, you know, the people in this world that need kindness the most are the ones that often deserve it the least. And it's not about you. Like if someone's having a bad day, if you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, you know, the odds may not be in the favor, but they might be on their way to the hospital because their mother is dying and they're drastically trying to get there. That person may be having the worst day of their life, and and they didn't even mean to cut you off. They didn't mean to. And when that person does that, you put so much hate out into the world. You're like, oh my God, you learn to drive, this, that, and another. And that's another stone that you're making a connection to. And that false tether isn't even real. It wasn't about you. And you know, there are I can still remember the first time, or one of the, I can still remember specific times when people did things on the road. And I used to catch myself reminiscing on it and thinking, man, that person was really stupid. And that person's not thinking about me. They don't even remember that day. Drinking poison, hoping it kills the enemy. And it was a false connection that was you hold on to. And road rage releases more cortisol in your system and causes more stress in your life than watching the news in the morning. Like
Yeah, it's the equivalent. I mean, you mentioned tigers before that create that kind of cortisol and adrenaline, and I guess like a road rage would be like, you know, fighting an enemy. You know, it's almost like that kind of, you know, antagonistic, you know, kind of going to battle. When you describe that metaphor, you know, intuitively it was coming to my mind that things like acceptance and forgiveness would be one of those things that would kind of cut the tether, so that these stones and pebbles kind of naturally bounce off and don't kind of weigh you down. What other things can help to move on from like the challenges and the problems so they don't cause these problems either in your garden or other people's?
Remembering, I think that's a great question, by the way. And I think that the best possible answer I could give in the moment is remembering that it's okay that you don't have to accept what has happened in your life as good or bad, but you do have to accept that it happened, and you can't change it, but you can move on. You know, and that's the biggest thing. I feel like in that sense is just remembering that like it's done. It's done. Like you can't go back and change that. And the more that you reminisce on the things that happened in your life, the more time you're wasting. I mean, think about it. If you sleep 8 hours a day and you work 8 hours a day, which is at 40 hours a week, within a 10-year span, you've been sleeping and at work for 6.8 years, meaning you only get 3.4 years out of every 10 years to spend with you, your family, your friends, and your loved ones. If you only see someone you love once every 3 years and they have 10 years to live, you don't have 10 more years with them. You have 3 more experiences with them. And if you have 3.4 out of 10 years, out of a 10-year span for yourself and your family, you don't have 10 years to experience it 3 more times. You have 3.4 years to experience those 3 more experiences. So when you stop judging or stop focusing so much on the pain of the things that have happened, and you realize how little time you actually have, you start seeing these thoughts as like products on a shelf, and your time that you have left is your currency. if you were to process that, there are in 1 hour, there are 3,600 seconds. 3,600 times 16 is 57,400. 57,400 minus 86,400 is 28,800 seconds left in the day to spend on the products on the shelf. What are you going to invest on it? Is it going to be that crap that stresses you out? Are you going to buy that? Are you going to pull that thing off the shelf and spend some more of your seconds dwelling on something that's going to destroy the rest of your day and make your day worse? Or are you going to put that back on the shelf, let it gain some dust, let it disappear, let it expire, and move on to something different?
I think it's a really, again, very powerful metaphor there, because I think it's, in addition to forgiveness and acceptance, it sounds like perspective is also, a crucial thing, because what you're doing there is that you're saying, look, in the big picture, these problems, these challenges, they don't matter that much. So just move on from them, I think is very good advice there. If someone wants to learn more about you or buy your book, where can they go for more information?
So if you want to learn about me, you can Google the name Tucker Bearden, and there's really no one else on Google. So there's that. But you can reach out to me on Facebook. That's really the easiest way to get in touch with me. If you send me a friend's request, please send me a message, because I have a lot of friends requests and I don't usually see them. But you can buy my book on Amazon, The Plate That Broke the World, One Man's Journey into the Ego. It's free on Kindle. The ebook is 99 cents if you don't have Kindle, and the paperback is $15. But if you want a signed copy from me, I'll mail it to you. You can get one from me. It's just $20 plus shipping, and I think it comes out like $24, $25 after everything. I'm not looking to get rich selling the book. It costs me a small fortune to make it.
I think that's very fair. Tucker, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I think you've got a fascinating perspective on the world. I think that metaphor is great, by the way, in terms of like the ego and problem solving and just kind of making the most of the life that we have. I think it's incredible. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It truly has been an honor and a blessing. And is there anywhere that people can buy your mug, because size matters?
I found this on Amazon. This is so for people listening to the podcast rather than watching on YouTube. I have a mug here that is absolutely, it's about as big as my head. It's about 1 liter. So yeah, that's just on Amazon. Put gigantic mug and you'll find that. Tucker, fantastic to have you on the show. Real pleasure. And to you at home, thanks for joining me on Modern Mindset. See you again soon for more.